Coming up on this episode of Healthy Longevity.
The way that I, define longevity medicine is, if we were to do a Venn diagram, you have the traditional healthcare system here, you have wellness here, and longevity is somewhere in the middle, where we're taking, the best parts of, the sort of traditional healthcare system, which is the rigor, the science, but we're using sort of like the lens of wellness, which is more, root cause disease, optimal health, Healthspan.
By understanding our own bodies intimately, I think we can make more defined choices, and we can take the knowledge and the data and actually turn it into wisdom.
Why is longevity medicine so hot right now?
We're all on this path to have abnormal carbohydrate metabolism. The longevity industry is booming, backed by investors, entrepreneurs, researchers, physicians, clinicians, looking beyond managing disease to target biological aging and stop and reverse aging to keep our healthful life. This shift marks a move towards the proactive style of healthcare that I've been delivering and advocating for over 30 years. From biotech to age tech, a wide variety of sectors are driving innovation to extend health span to match lifespan. Estimates actually suggest that the global longevity economy could surpass $600 billion by 2025, with trillions in long-term potential as the population ages beyond 100 and the demand for health span boosting solutions grows. Hello, and welcome to the Healthy Longevity Podcast. I'm Dr. Florence Comite, founder of the Comite Center for Precision Medicine and Healthy Longevity in New York, Palo Alto, and Miami Beach. My guest today says, longevity is having a cultural moment. And I'm really excited to explore what she actually means and discuss the welcome growth in this proactive approach to people's health for life. Delphine Le Grand builds brands and partners at the intersection of wellness, longevity, and functional health. She works with early-stage companies on growth positioning and go-to-market execution, especially where cutting-edge science meets consumer experience. Delphine also collaborates closely with longevity physicians to bring personalized preventative care models to market. Her work is grounded in the belief that the future of health is proactive, data-driven, and built on trust. Delighted to have you here, Delphine, and I can't wait to learn more about what your interest is and the work you're doing, which is so exciting.
Yeah, it's been a very interesting journey, to say the least. Exciting, definitely.
Can you tell our listeners a little bit about your background? I believe you're from Canada, French-Canadian?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about your journey.
So I'm from Montreal originally, born and raised, and my parents have a plant-based food company. So I grew up in a very holistic household. It's funny now because all of these things are becoming very trendy, cold plunge, sauna, but it was a pretty kind of marginalized experience 30 plus years ago. Yeah. So my parents, they came from very sort of like alternative backgrounds as well. My grandmother on my dad's side, she was, this total hippie. My grandfather on my mom's side, he was a Olympic athlete.
Wow.
And so, when they met, there was always this importance of, holistic health. But it's funny because as a child, even though you can, understand intellectually maybe the importance of it, you kind of just want to fit in, right? And so I think from a very young age, I kind of, developed this intuition that, the way that we were being raised was very different from other people. And I think I became particularly attuned to sort of like health, the way we were doing it, and the way it was kind of perceived at large. And so
if perceived at all.
If perceived at all, yeah, exactly.
Mostly health is about disease.
Yes.
At least in your world, it sounds like. Were you totally raised on plant-based food and no source of any carnivorous foods or anything like that?
That actually kind of became a later thing. So, my parents kind of went through many different waves of exploration. But the way that we were raised, so it was always, focused on grains, vegetables, fruit, but with sort of like a side of meat, high quality meat, dairy. We ate everything. But my dad being a chef, he made the most incredible meals. And I think that was one of my very early learnings that, you don't have to sacrifice eating delicious food for health, right?
Oh,
Like
no doubt.
those two things can go together. And I think that's probably one of the, biggest misconceptions, which is finally changing now. But, I have so many memories growing up where Sunday brunch, I mean, we would cook with my parents, all day and then share a meal and great conversation, maybe more of a European way of living.
I can understand that.
Yeah.
I actually was raised by Europeans too, and we had the exact same thing. As you'll see in my book, Keep It Up, there's a foreword where I speak to the fact that we ate food from my mother's fresh garden, and everything was grown, tons of fruits and vegetables, never had canned foods or frozen food. But it sounds like your parents had the exact right approach that today is becoming. It just takes a long time to get into the kind of natural way of doing things, and people aren't used to it. Plus, there aren't nutrients in soil anymore, so that's a big issue.
That's absolutely. Yeah. And, there were many other things that they did. Like I have some kind of, ridiculous examples. So growing up in Quebec, I mean, it's freezing cold in the middle of the winter. And, my dad, he would always roll in the snow in the morning in his boxers.
Like the plunge.
The plunge.
Right?
Exactly. And my friends would see them and they're like, what is your dad doing? I'm like, I don't know. It's, you're a 13-year-old. I'm like, I think it's for health. This is, pre-Wim Hof, all of that stuff,
That's great, though. Yeah. So you come by, it's built into your DNA. It's fantastic.
Very much so. Very much so. I remember coming home from school one day and, the kitchen smelled so strange. And I started opening up all the kitchen cabinets and I see these like bowls of water with these kind of giant floating mushrooms. And I was like, Papa, like, what is this? And he's like, oh, it's kombucha. And I'm like, what is kombucha? So, from a very young age, always, this quest for health, for exploration, but not in the way that it's become kind of, biohacking. It was just like living well, feeling good, and a lot of joy in that process as well.
It adds to it. I think it's the way people lived a century ago, because I was raised by a mother too, came from a very small village in Czechoslovakia, and when we went back to visit, I could see what was inbred in her. Everybody had a garden. Everybody ate outside a lot. They ate fresh food. They always had plenty of food at a meal. You never ran out of food. You can invite many people over, and you'd still have leftovers. So, and it was all about cooking, and so that's fun. It sounds a little similar, but you sound like you were way ahead of the mainstream even, today, actually.
Yeah.
So what brought you to New York?
Oh, that's another long story.
Okay.
So I always wanted to move to the U.S., California, New York. Kind of had this idea of the American dream, as many Canadians do, and I actually started off. So I studied in Montreal at McGill, and I started off as a marketing major. And as I started looking into visas, immigration, I actually realized that it would be a lot easier for me to move to the U.S. if I studied accounting for visa purposes. I'm definitely not like an accounting person at heart, but really wanted to like I said, move to the U.S. So I actually transitioned from marketing to accounting. I did my CPA. I worked at EY in Montreal, eventually transferred to the San Francisco office, and then I joined a large fintech company, Stripe, and I was there for 4 years. 4 years of hyper growth. But during my time at Stripe, I went through my own personal health journey. And I just always really knew that I wanted to be in the health and wellness space. That was my true passion. It was, the way that I was raised. And so I always kind of had it, but it's like, well, I'm not a doctor. I'm, not necessarily in the healthcare or health tech space. How do I go about doing that? So it was definitely a process. But once I kind of had my own sort of health experience after moving to the US, that really shifted things.
Do you feel comfortable talking about that health experience?
Yes, absolutely.
Be curious, because I think that happens to a lot of folks out here. They suffer through a journey that they really wish they could do better, and they end up helping everyone around them. And it sounds like you made the right. I mean, it can never hurt to have accounting in your background, right? So it sounds like you did the right thing. But I'm curious as to what made that shift, and how obviously your marketing interest and background will also be brought to bear on this shift into longevity and wellness.
Absolutely. So I moved to San Francisco initially, and up until that point, I had always been quite healthy. Like I said, raised in a very holistic household, and then I moved to the U.S. and I was working a ton of hours. I did not prioritize my sleep. I worked at one of those tech companies where you had unlimited food. So it was just one of those things where lack of sleep, sugar cravings, I was kind of like on this, sort of, negative feedback loop. And I was new to the city, so I really wanted to meet people. At the time, that meant going out a lot, more drinks. And so I kind of, just got to this point where, especially during COVID with the isolation, really took stock of my health. And, I had gained 20 pounds, brain fog, eczema. And these are all things that were quite new to me that I had never experienced. And so I really kind of started on my own quest of like, how do I, address this? How can I kind of, fix the root cause? And so that was quite a process.
Yeah, it sounds very classic. You had social jet lag, meaning you were up probably all hours and still had to get up the next day and work. And when you don't get enough sleep, the hormone ghrelin goes crazy and you crave carbs even more. So you want those sugary donuts and stuff that's not good. It's amazing how the body senses all this by itself, the system.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you course corrected, if anything, if looks show. It's great. And it sounds like you took a hold of it. So that's wonderful. And now you have a reason to base what you want to do on how you figured it out and how you can help other people look at it.
Absolutely. And I think that was kind of the true start of my, or maybe not the true start of my journey, but of my deeper exploration, I guess I should say. And so, during COVID, fully remote, I was still working for Stripe. And like I said, I was experiencing all these symptoms. And so I started to do the things that, I understood well enough, right? So prioritizing sleep.
Except there's no snow in San Francisco.
Exactly. A little bit more challenging in San Francisco.
Well, you can go to Tahoe.
It's true. There are options. Absolutely.
I can just see your father calling me and saying, hey, listen, I know the way you get better.
Yeah. Oh, trust me, they were very involved in this whole process. So just started, eating better, exercising, and it improved, but it wasn't getting me back to 100% or what I knew to be 100%. And so I, listened to this podcast that talked about the benefits of, intermittent fasting, started incorporating intermittent fasting, eventually started to do prolonged fasting. So I did my first 5-day water-only fast, which was incredibly challenging. But on day 4 of my fast, my eczema completely cleared. And so that kind of got me, thinking, it's like, I don't understand exactly how this works, but clearly something is happening. So then went fully down the rabbit hole. And 6 months later, this would have been in the spring of 2021. I signed up for this 5-week stay at this sort of like, alternative health clinic called True North in Northern California, where they essentially treat people with prolonged fasting and whole food plant-based eating. So I got there, my, doctor, ran my labs, did my whole health assessment. And basically by the end of it, he was like, you'd be a candidate for a 21-day water fast. Wow. And so at that point, I was like, what, if I'm going to do it at any point in my life, it's going to be, now under medical supervision. So I did the 21 days, just water, nothing else, with a 10-day refeed. And I mean, it was such a learning experience. Not that I would necessarily recommend it to other people, but I think the biggest learning from that was our bodies are absolutely incredible. If you had told me a year before that I could do something like that, I would have said, no, that's crazy. You would die. Yeah. That's impossible. And so I think that completely changed my mindset and not necessarily in the way of like, oh, everybody needs to start fasting, but more just there's so much left to uncover, so much that we don't know, and the possibilities, what you can do when you actually take control and have the right resources and tools is truly amazing.
No, I think you said it beautifully. And, I also want to emphasize to our listeners that not everyone can do even a 5-day fast. No. And I personally know that from doing the work I've done in the studies, that I can intermittently fast. It's no big deal to me. In fact, I haven't even finished the shake I usually start the day with. I usually don't finish it until the middle of the afternoon. But a lot of people can't. They actually would pass out that morning. So the fact that 21 days, that was amazing. And I know people talk about that. And the one cautionary note that I like, you said it as well, is it's just not for everyone. No. Like each one of us is unique. And that's the way I think about N of 1. Yeah. Even having an identical twin, I know we're not exactly alike. And yet we should be very similar, right? We're born from the same gene pool. But the way genes express can change. The way we live life can change. And the fact that you can take control of it, but you have to do what's the right fit for you. And that's where I sometimes have issues with current influencers online. Because I think what happens is they make changes for themselves and then they advocate it for everyone. And that is just not right because each of us is unique.
Yeah.
And being able to figure out what that makes us in terms of how we have to live life, the choices we make, is really quite essential to our good health. So sounds like you figured that out pretty early, and that's impressive. So was it a full 31 days? Because you said a 10-day refeed after the 21-day fast. You then so you were able to take that whole time out of your life and focus on
I was working at Strips. I was working remote. Yeah.
So you didn't have to move into a facility. They actually monitored you from a distance.
Yeah, exactly. Or I was in the facility and then working remote for the company. And so, I mean, yeah, I would get on Zoom calls and, my colleagues would be like, "You're still alive. This is great."
So were you completely like no food except water? Did you have any cravings or any kind of interest?
Oh yeah.
What did that disappear after a while?
After, I would say, day 5.
It's interesting because I have a close colleague and friend who's a Qigong master. His name is Robert Peng, and you can look at him. When he learned Qigong, he learned it under the guidance of a monk in China when he was very young, like about 20. And he had a 100-day fast, and he was only allowed like an olive or two the first 20 days.
Yeah.
And he said the
indulgence.
Places, the places he was able to go and how it freed up his mind into different dimensions was incredible. So you might resonate with what he learned through it. But 100 days seems incredible. 21 days seems impossible.
Wow.
And I can fast, but I don't know that I'd want to go even 21 days.
Yeah.
So.
And I think it was a point in time, like I wouldn't do that now. And I think my health, is I'm in a better place where I don't feel sort of the necessity to go to that extreme. But I think sometimes, pushing the boundaries to understand how your body responds, how your mind responds, and then you can kind of like recalibrate to what is,
always
your normal.
In fact, I completely agree with that. As a clinical investigator myself, I started using glucagon-like peptides 20 years ago when it first came to the market as Byetta, where you took it before you ate. And I tested it because I believe in testing whatever I can before I share that knowledge and specifically identify who would do well with it. And I remember using it and not being able to enjoy like lava cake at a dessert at a restaurant and feeling it in my head and in my belly. So like you, I wanted to experience it, but I don't know that I could stay on it. And the choice at that point was great because it was in anticipation of a meal as opposed to weekly. And so I was able to cut it out when I wanted to.
That's
but
great.
Yes, I do think testing the boundaries and making sure that you understand intimately what your body and system is doing really gives you ownership over your health for the future. So that sounds great. And I'm curious now, shifting a little bit, what would be your definition of longevity in any way you want to define it? How do you think of longevity?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it a bit yesterday where, you've been practicing preventative medicine for, 30 plus years, right? And, the way that I was raised by my family, I think would definitely kind of fall in that sort of, preventative health bucket. And what's interesting is that longevity sort of like as a term has really taken off. There's a ton of excitement. And I think, there's a few different reasons for that. One, I don't think we would be in that place without COVID, right? People suffered tremendously. And, before that, people were suffering as well. But I think COVID really brought it to the surface.
It did. The comorbidities and people recognizing, plus like you, people were isolated. And the notion that they could keep their health and maybe prevent COVID and certainly prevent the decline, which became obvious that if you did have comorbidities and you weren't even aware of it. I've had doctors come to me since who have long COVID and they arrested. They were on respirators. Luckily, it was early in the course in New York, so they survived, but not well, and largely because of not being well under the surface, even doctors. So,
and so I think that's what we experienced, on a societal level, and so the problems were already there, but it surfaced. And, people really realize like we need better solutions. This isn't working. And health is so incredibly important because, it's all we have, right? If we don't have our health, what do we have?
Exactly. Health is the center of everything, although
absolutely.
I am biased. So. But it is true, right? It is true, right?
And so I think, we wouldn't have longevity or the rise of longevity without COVID and the desire for better solutions. And so what's interesting over the last few years when we track it is, wellness has been around for many years, traditional healthcare, of course, it's traditional healthcare. But really what's happening and kind of the way that I, define longevity medicine is, if we were to do a Venn diagram, you have the traditional healthcare system here, you have wellness here, and longevity is somewhere in the middle where we're taking, the best parts of, the sort of traditional healthcare system, which is the rigor, the science, but we're using sort of like the lens of wellness, which is more, root cause disease, optimal health, health span. And so I think that's why the longevity field is so interesting, is because it's more medical in many ways than, wellness has been, which has been a little bit more alternative, maybe more kind of like influencer driven. And so I think this is really, the future of just medicine, simply put.
Does that relate to what a longevity market map might be? Because I fully agree with you. About 20 years ago, when I was still full-time at Yale, which I was until 2010, I actually set up the model at a resort spa in California called Ojai Valley Inn and Spa. And there I was always queried about what was different between me and Canyon Ranch. And I would say something very similar, that Canyon Ranch took it to a certain point, but what we did was delve below the surface to the cellular level and see what you were made of. Because if you go back a century or two, people did live off the land. They didn't live a very long life in general until antibiotics came into play mid-20th century. But it's that survival until 100 or later. Nowadays, it's happening. It's widespread, but we're not healthy. And so the burden for the individual, for the family, for the country, for the world is humongous. And I think we have to introduce critical thinking, real data, not just opinion driven. As good as the opinions might be, it just might not apply to everybody.
Doesn't cut it.
It doesn't cut it to me, actually. I'm about data. So, and actually, I do think of what we do as preventative, but I'm more about proactive versus reactive. So in conventional medicine, which that's how I usually refer to traditional, because I think of traditional Chinese medicine.
That's
so I think of conventional medicine, and I was born and bred in a classical, education at Yale, at NIH, where I did clinical investigation and research in people. So to me, deviating from the notion that we're not really about disease care, we're about health, and how do we define that for each person, and how much more importantly, how can we maintain it for the rest of our life, is really what matters to me. Because if we're going to live a long life, as I think I heard you say, I don't want to make the choices that Brian Johnson are making. I wouldn't want to live a long life, right? And yet there are people who are now following his model without having an understanding of whether it's actually good for them. So to me, it's about, you need to follow your own North Star, your own true journey, and every one of us has to understand the data about what makes us who we are. Who's you, who's me, and what makes you you is what defines what the solutions can be. And that's what I set out to do here too. So I think of it as precision medicine. And I used to duke it out because people would say, no, this is personalized medicine, years ago. And I would say, no, medicine is always personal to me. If it's good medicine, it's personal. And most doctors and clinicians are good. They've studied the craft. They want to do a job that helps the people in their care. But the reason for precision, and maybe it comes out of my clinical research, is it has to be built on data. You have to know what you're doing to get proof of concept and then a return on investment, because can be an expensive field to get into for both the clinician and physician as well as a patient who's seeking that kind of care. It isn't available everywhere. It will be in the future, but I thought 20 plus years ago it would be 20 years, and now I think it's going to be 50 to 100 years because I don't think it's reachable. But I think AI is going to help it. So that's what I'm very focused on as well. So I want to extend Healthspan because to me, living a long life, and nobody could tell how long anyone's life is, means you own your own health, and you can, up until the very last moment, and maybe your cells get tired and you go lay down in bed one night and you just don't wake up. But up until that time, you're doing you can do any kind of sport you want. You can live life to the fullest. You can enjoy every moment. Otherwise, to me, living a long life may not be so much fun. That joie de vie in life would be fantastic for all of us to own, independent of the expense of what it means to get a chronic disease and then have to live with it.
Absolutely. And I think, on the sort of like, a life extension, Brian Johnson, I think people will always be fascinated by what is aspirational or, seemingly out of reach, right? Or a little bit controversial. And so I think that's what a lot of these, public figures, like Brian Johnson have, promoted, right? And when he kind of
brought attention to the field, that's for sure.
A lot of attention.
Right.
And when he talks about, health optimization, at least from my perspective, it's like he's seeking perfection. And I think most people look at that a little bit like, it's kind of fascinating. It's a little bit of a clown show. It's a little ridiculous out there. It's entertaining. Exactly. But that's not actually the way that most people want to live, right? I work in this field now, and I still enjoy a glass of wine. I still, enjoy a really good meal. And to me, that brings me so much joy that it's worth it, right? But I think everyone has to make their own personal calculus of what that looks like. But I think very few people are actually seeking that type of optimization.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. You have to weigh risk-benefit, and you have to make sure what's a fit for each one of us really makes sense.
Yes.
So we use the term a lot here. It's not deprivation, it's moderation.
Yeah.
And making choices means what's right for you. Like, if you're going to give up wine completely, is there a real reason for it? Or can you back down, and will your indices show that you're doing something that's favorable and you can keep that balance in your life? So that's what we all need. I know you're involved with the longevity ladies. Tell me something about how that came about. Like, what's your interest there?
Absolutely. So I organized a health and wellness conference a year ago, and Dr. Poonam Desai, she was one of our speakers, did an incredible job, and that's how the two of us connected, and we stayed in touch. And I would say it's funny because, as we mentioned earlier, you've been practicing this for many, many years, but it still feels like the ecosystem, in New York is being built, right? And it's growing. It's growing quickly. But when I started exploring the space, more formally, I would say, 2+ years ago, it still felt like it was very sort of health tech dominant, which to me felt like conventional healthcare, but with a tech wrapper on it, right? Where we're not really talking about the root cause of disease, optimal health. And so that's kind of why I started on this journey of I want to, build communities, bring people together, because the conventional healthcare system, it's built. All the pieces are there. And everything that is happening outside of that, we're still missing the connective tissue. And so going back to that, that's how, Dr. Desai and I connected. And we have become friends since then. And it's one of those things where I truly believe that, rising tide lifts all boats. And so I will do everything in my power to help promote the incredible, people, organizations, conferences around me that, because we all share the same mission.
Great. Well, I'd love to have known you 20-something years ago when I had Minds and Body conferences, and I brought people in to talk about wellness, the people who wrote about it in the New York Times.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. I think it's coming to a head now. It's still not there.
Yeah.
It will be. And I think women can drive that system.
Yes.
And I think many of us do the hard labor, not necessarily are the influencers, but I think that can also change. And
Absolutely.
I'm looking forward to your help with that.
Yes,
so.
definitely.
Another thing I read that you wrote is that more data may not be the answer if you don't know what to do with that. What do you mean by that? Because I think I'm in complete agreement, because that's what drives me, data. But I'm wondering how you came to see that. What triggered that in you?
Absolutely. I think we're at a point in time where we are so inundated with information, especially when it comes to health. Do your blood work, do your genome testing, do all these different tests, but we don't know exactly why, what are we actually trying to improve? I was actually speaking with a friend yesterday, and he was telling me, he's like, I've done, all my tests. He's like, I wanted to do everything. And everything came back and told me that I was fine. But he's like, I know that I'm not sleeping enough. He's like, I know that I feel tired most of the time. He's like, I know that I have brain fog, and yet everything is fine. And so I think we're at this point in time where, we're inundated with data, we're inundated with information. We don't know who to turn to, how to get started. And so we need data, absolutely. We can't really make informed decisions without it, but we need to have the right type of information with the right type of care to guide us through that process. And I think right now that's really the piece that is missing. We're finally starting to get more data, and that's a good thing. But once again, it's what do we do with all this data?
Exactly. I've seen reams of data from different studies, and basically with no answers. Like, where do you go next? And what do you do? And what if this score for you is not my score? I need a different score. So how do you define that? I completely agree. So I think it sounds like you're probably as tired of the term biohacking.
Oh my God. Don't even get me started.
I can completely agree. But I do think there are game changers in today's world. You said something else about building tools to optimize health, but not really fixing the system that can deliver that care. And that's exactly what it resonates. And what you just said really encompasses that whole issue. You can be inundated with the numbers, or the data, but then what do you do about it? Because doctors don't know. And so if doctors don't know and they've studied the human system, how are you going to know where you need to be and how you need to go there? So to me, it actually rests in the genome as well, and epigenetic factors. And the more we know about the bits and bytes of a human being, the more we can define the path and the journey they're on, so that we can define their future health trajectory and turn it around. So you can own biological aging. To me, aging chronologically is defined by disease. If we can reverse biological aging and keep people even at 60, 70, 80, as young as 30 in terms of their body and their health, then they won't get disease, because most diseases come about because our bodies are beginning to fail. So if we can keep our bodies on a steady course in moderation, I think we're going to own our own future in health. That's to me what optimal health should be.
Absolutely. And I think those two things that you said tie together, where, we have biohacking, and then we have all these tools, right? And the reality is that there's no, silver bullet. There's not going to be one thing that will, fix your entire health.
Right.
And I think that's kind of the challenge with, biohacking, or, some of these tools. Biohacking, we have hacks, right? It implies that there's this, this one thing that you'll do, and, all of a sudden, like, all good, all fixed. And health, as you know, it doesn't work that way.
Right.
And so I think when it comes to, the therapies, a lot of them can be very effective. But you need a plan, you need that holistic approach, and you need, once again, the people that are guiding you along the way. And so I think that's really kind of the piece that is missing. It's like we're starting to get to the tools, we're starting to understand that, okay, we don't have to practice, medicine the way that it's been kind of practiced for many years. There's new ways of doing that, hopefully are better, but we still need the infrastructure to help support that.
Yeah. And I think we do a great job, at least in U.S. medicine. You hit a wall and you can get care. Even during COVID, they saved lives, even not knowing exactly what to do, but figuring it out. That's the goal. But I think owning proactively how you keep your health, as opposed to letting it decline and then jumping all over it, is what's still lacking in terms of how do you connect the dots to me? How do you integrate everything in one human being and then come out with an interpretation that allows you to have insights and interventions that are actionable and work for a person. Like, if I see someone from a country where rice is the main source of food, I might say to them, you can cut down on it. I won't say cut it out completely, because it's the way they live life. But once they get a feel for how they feel, you can then walk along that line with them. And so
absolutely.
I think it's fascinating. There's so much more to learn.
Yes.
I want to turn the conversation to AI just to wrap up as well, because I think that is also going to be a game changer, along with wearables like Aura, or I'm wearing a CGM. Because by understanding our own bodies intimately, I think we can make more defined choices, and we can take the knowledge and the data and actually turn it into wisdom. So I follow a lot of people's sugar basis, and as a matter of fact, as an endocrinologist, I hated diabetes. I had to teach it at Yale. It was like one of the only courses right before students graduated in their fourth year that they had to attend because Yale was could do whatever you want. As a medical student, they ran the place, which made me happy when I was a student, not so happy when I was faculty. And I used to hate diabetes because I felt like it destroyed every cell in the body. So now, 30 years later, I see that we're all on this path to have abnormal carbohydrate metabolism. And that's one of the reasons I think GLP-1s have hit the world the way antibiotics did 100 years ago or 50, in 1950s, because we all have inherited genes that make it impossible to keep our sugar stable. And that is a really important factor in kind of avoiding diseases like Alzheimer's and heart disease and stroke and all of that. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are along those lines, because I see it as a perfect match to AI, where AI can help take some of the routine stuff and the weight that's on doctors and clinicians off our plate so that we can focus on making change and bringing wisdom to the table.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think, some companies are working on it. No company has quite cracked the code yet, but absolutely. I think, and I think going back to, our earlier discussion on, why is longevity medicine so hot right now? I think that also ties into, now we have all these wearables, we have the data from wearables, we have AI that's rising at the same time. And so I think it's this confluence of factors where there's this true hope for the future that we can do things differently and better and in a way that is truly precise that, before we simply did not have the tools to be able to achieve that.
True. Like we had to guess a lot. So we're almost wrapped up. I like to ask one last question with about your own belief in health and what you might say if a friend said to you, if you could just choose one thing that I could do today to live healthier tomorrow, what would that be? Is there something that you're particularly committed to, or love to hear what you think?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, I have experimented with so many different things over the years. And, to your point, I think it's very different from person to person, right? We all have, the fundamentals of health. That's always going to be, the foundation of health optimization. But I think the one thing that, people can do is really ask themselves, what is blocking them from, achieving optimal health right now? And I think we all have this intuitive sense of what is the area that is the most compromised. And that might change at, different points in time, right? And so I know, for me right now, I'm, juggling all these different, priorities and, sleep has really taken a hit. And so, that's where I'm like, I exercise regularly. I eat a pretty good diet. I'm, overall a healthy person, but man, I have to prioritize my sleep and I have to, really focus on that, because if I don't, then everything else kind of falls away. And so I think for each person, really kind of tuning in, what is the one thing right now that is really kind of holding me back? And for some people that might be sleep, it might be, nutrition, it might be stress. So what is the one thing? Don't try to do it all and just focus on that one thing, and then you can unlock the rest.
Yeah. You build from that. That sounds beautiful. I don't know if you've heard me say, I think of sleep as the new exercise.
Yes.
So if I'm going to opt for it, and because a lot of people think they get sick just in terms of what you're focusing on, and they should still work out. And actually, no, you actually have to rest your body and let your immune system, heal thyself in a way. And sleep is paramount. So I love it. How can people find you if they want to look for you and get your insight, and where should they follow you?
Absolutely. Yes. Okay. So I talk about the business of longevity on LinkedIn. And so you can find me at Delphine Le Grand Official. Delphine Le Grand was not available, so I just went with the official at the end.
There are other Delphine. It's such a great name. Really?
Apparently.
Wow.
Yes.
I love your name. It's so unique.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Well, this has been so much fun, and I'll look forward to future conversations. I think we're going somewhere.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a true pleasure.
Excellent.